All right, coming back home, the battle is going to continue over the so-called Build Back Better bill, which is a big government socialist monstrosity. Joining me now to talk about is North Dakota Senator Kevin Cramer, sits on Senate Banking and Armed Services. Good morning, Senator Cramer, and Merry Christmas and Happy New Year's. And I'm sorry I booked you on air on the Kudlow Show, but you've done great. You came back for us, and I appreciate it.
Anything for you and Maria.
Yeah, well, Maria's terrific. I think Schumer's saying, you tell me what you're hearing, but Schumer's going to have perhaps two votes. I don't know when. Early January, late January, I have no idea. I think they want to vote on the rule, the legislative process rule, which then allows you to go into the amendments, and then they want to make a final vote. I don't know why. I mean, Senator, the thing is, all they're going to do is keep bashing Joe Manchin. I mean, this is done to discredit Manchin. So I don't really understand the logic. Can you help us?
Well, I can't understand the logic, certainly from a political standpoint, because it's much disfavor as the whole Biden socialist agenda is enjoying, I guess, across the country. I don't know why they'd want to continue it, except that Chuck Schumer has people pulling and pushing and tugging from every possible direction, and I'm sure he's wondering what direction to go. But I do know this, that Joe Manchin may have saved the re-election of 2, 3, or 4 possibly Democratic senators who would have had to vote yes on BBB, on Build Back Better, but would rather not have voted at all. They were awarded this opportunity to give it a pass for a year. And yet they just seem hell-bent on doing it. And maybe there's a whole bunch of Democratic members willing to be martyrs at the altar of socialism. If that's the case, maybe they'll find a way to vote on it yet and further lead to their political demise while destroying the country.
Well, Senator, it just occurs to me, in terms of Chuck Schumer's legislative and political strategy, that he may not be calling the shots. AOC may be calling the shots, what some people call Sandy Cortez, the House member, who may run against Schumer in the primaries in New York. But, I mean, he's kowtowing to her and her group. That's what it sounds like.
I don't think there's any question, Larry, that in the back of Chuck Schumer's mind, every move he makes, every vote he calls, he's thinking about AOC and the possibility that she'll run against him in a Democratic primary in New York. I do think that's one of those pressure points I talked about earlier. Now, in addition to that, of course, he's got a White House that's tugging at him. He's got Speaker Pelosi that's pulling. They're all responding to those very same pressure points. But it is, in my mind, what's such a great tragedy about it is that a once great Democratic Party has become this bizarre socialist agenda where they seem to be putting all the chips on the table this year while they have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And thank God for Joe Manchin and others like him, but especially Joe Manchin, who has, trying to save America and in the process may very well save the Democratic Party.
Well, I don't think I'll save the Democratic Party, but I think all of us will help save America. I mean, yeah. Kevin, the country hates this bill, okay?
Yes,
the country just hates this bill. Let me take a quick break, Senator. You're going to stay with us and come back. Got a couple of other items to talk about. Folks, much more with Senator Kevin Cramer after the break. All right, we are back with Senator Kevin Cramer. Again, Merry Christmas to everybody. And Senator, can I just, we were talking about Manchin and other matters, whether Manchin might switch parties. Mitch McConnell on my show and elsewhere have suggested, he's all open to it. I don't know if it works for Joe Manchin or not.
Right.
He might have trouble in a Republican primary. But I want to just put that aside for a minute. Mr. Manchin will play a big role in whatever budget votes come up. I want to ask you about Ted Cruz, Senator Ted Cruz, your colleague. He was asked if he would consider another bid for the presidency. And he quoted, and I'll quote directly, "Absolutely, in a heartbeat," end quote. And then he said later, historically, the runner-up in one convention becomes the nominee in the other convention. The reason I ask you about that is that's, I think, the clearest, most aggressive statement for anybody that might enter the primary. What you think about that?
So Ted's right in this sense that the tradition over the decades of the Republican Party is that presidential nominees often are sort of heir apparent, whether it was Bob Dole or George Bush, George Herbert Walker Bush, and whatnot. But Donald Trump sort of blew up the whole system when he became our nominee and then became our president. And so I'm not so sure that tradition will be restored. That said, I would be shocked if Ted Cruz didn't run again, as well as a number of other people, including, by the way, your first guest, who every time I listen to Mike Pompeo, I think, thank God he was our Secretary of State, and wouldn't he be a great president someday? So I think that we have the richness in our party of having a really deep bench, a lot of talented people that with all the right credentials that could lead this country in a great way. And let's not forget that Donald Trump may make another run. And if he does, I suspect there'd be a pretty good chance he'd be our nominee. So good for Ted. I think he ought to, be in the game. But there'll be a lot of others as well, I'm sure.
All right, let me move on. The war on fossil fuels, the Biden war on fossil fuels, which extends to Russia too. As Mike Pompeo said, Biden gave Putin a gift by ending the sanctions on Nord Stream 2. Now, Ted Cruz and others want to restore those sanctions. I wish they had done it already. I read your article with General McMaster in Foreign Policy magazine. Now, let me understand it. You want a carbon fee on imports into the United States? Is that what you're asking? That would hurt Russia because they have dirtier oil and dirtier gas?
Well, I think what our piece is advocating, or at least suggesting, we're not necessarily advocating as much as throwing this out. European Union has already done that very thing, although they have this, as we call the Nord Stream 2 loophole, as it relates to dirty Russian natural gas. What we're saying is, what if the European Union, our NATO allies, and the United States went together? We have the cleanest energy production in the world, cleanest manufacturing in the world, and set some sort of a carbon border fee on imports coming in. Much like a tariff, and I know you and I are free traders, and the notion of things like tariffs used to be very uncomfortable for us. But I think, again, Donald Trump taught us a few things about America First. It's not just a slogan. America First is a good policy priority. And so we're suggesting that we consider some sort of an alliance with our trading allies, particularly the European Union, that would provide that leverage that we already ought to have as clean producers of all things, and put Russia at a disadvantage economically, in addition to the sanctions. And I support, obviously, Ted's move on Nord Stream 2. But I just think this would be a way to be leaders globally on climate change without harming, in fact, enhancing the United States' incredible economy and the America First policy that Donald Trump started as our president.
Well, as one of the point people for Europe, along with my pal Bob Lighthizer, I wish you luck, Senator Cramer, in negotiating any trade deal with them. I am worried, though, if you're going to pop into the idea of a carbon tax, which might spread domestically. Is that really what we want?
No.
And why not just put sanctions on dirty Russian oil and gas? Let's just sanction Russia and their exports to us. Last point, I've got 20 seconds.
Yeah, the only reason, for what we're suggesting is let's do it in alliance with our European partners and bring them on board as NATO partners. Remembering, we often talk about energy security and energy policy and energy dominance, but remembering that national security and the geopolitical opportunities that 20% of the world's economy, the United States, and our partners in Europe, the kind of leverage we could bring to a table like that could put people like Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin in a very serious defensive posture. And it's just one more idea, Larry, and one more America First idea that could take shape and either as sanctions or as a border fee. But
Sure.
we couldn't do it alone.
Sure.
I think we need to do it in alliance with our NATO partners.
Well, when I get down there and you're back to Washington, I'm going to buy you dinner, and we're going to talk about carbon tax and all the rest of that stuff, and negotiating with the European Union, which is very difficult.
Understand.
But Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, Senator Kevin Cramer. You're great to
Merry
us this morning. Thanks ever so much.